Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library, and I am thrilled to be here with author Heather Wolf, who wrote a book called Find More Birds, which we are endlessly fascinated by. This is our third time hosting Heather because endlessly, like I said. And I will get to Heather in just a second. I just want to say thank you to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. We couldn't do this stuff without them. And Heather, once again, has allowed us to share this program with other libraries, and 40 libraries are partnering on this particular um, program because everybody loves birds and everybody loves Heather. So, between the two, we have 40 libraries partnering and making magic tonight. So thank you. You can buy signed books by Heather from Aesop's Fable. I will put a link in the chat for that, or just send it to you afterwards. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. It's a button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll moderate those questions to Heather after her slides. And during her slides and presentation, I will be turning the chat off for you guys, for each other, but you can still chat with me if you have a tech issue, just so that it's not distracting to anybody. And okay, so let's get to Heather. Heather Wolf is an author and birder who just went birding this morning, apparently, and wrote this wonderful book, Find More Birds. She lives in Brooklyn, and she travels quite a lot to find the best birds. And I believe you do all of your own photography.
Yes.
Yes. And you also teach, and you also are a fabulous person. So I don't even know how you get time to do it all. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Heather. I will be off screen, but available if you need anything. And everybody who's here, enjoy the show. I know I will.
Thank you so much, Mina. And I'm in Brooklyn, New York, so I think that was some kind of a horn. So if there's a siren or anything, this is just how it is here. I hope you don't mind. If it gets really bad, I'll mute myself while the siren passes. But Mina, thank you so much for that introduction. I love what you're doing with Ashland Library and all of the partner libraries. It's just so great. I love being here. I love sharing this with you all. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started here. So let's see. I want to make sure my sound is shared here. Let's see. Share computer sound. We got it. All right. All right. So hopefully everyone can see that. If you can't, Mina, let me know. But I think you can. And tonight, I'm going to be talking about finding and identifying birds, specifically in the context of a patch. And we're going to learn what a patch is. As Mina said, I travel all over, but I love birding the most in my patch, which is close to home. It's Brooklyn Bridge Park. And I'm going to be talking about some of the benefits of that tonight. So first, I'm going to cover what is a patch and how having one can build your birding skills, make it easier to find and identify birds, and really make it easy to step into a nature documentary that's really happening right outside your door, especially right now. I mean, all year round, but right now it's fall migration. So migration is always fun because you can get more species than you normally would at different times of the year. I'm also going to talk about the positive impacts of having a patch. So let's go ahead and get started. What is a birding patch? Well, really, I mean, it's a place that has bird habitat. It can have one or more habitats, which I like to equate to a bird's favorite restaurants, a place they eat, a place they can find food, or they rest and hang out as well. But the most important thing is that it's a place you can visit often. As I mentioned, my patch is very close. So today before work, I went out for just 15 minutes and heard a Carolina wren singing and saw some catbirds and a common yellowthroat. So the idea here is that for you to experience a patch and build your birding skills, having a patch is better than going on a trip and looking at birds, because if you have a patch, you're going to be visiting this often. So preferably several times a week or every day if you can, which is great. I tend to really go on the weekends religiously, but and sometimes I'll go during the week as well. Now, what makes a patch? I mean, I keep a list from my window, so I actually have a patch right here within my apartment I've seen an osprey, I've seen a peregrine falcon. So your patch could be just looking out your window if you have a tree or even or anything that a bird could perch on. But more traditionally, it might be your backyard. So you may have a built-in patch right at your house. It could be your street or your block, the trees there. Maybe there are, our front yards or things like that, or a local park, which in my case is my main patch, Brooklyn Bridge Park. Um, Also, if there's a local pond or lake or reservoir near you, as you know, a lot of birds gather. There are a lot of ducks and geese, and that's kind of the first thing that people are drawn to. And a lot of families see ducks and geese, but really there is a lot more going on around those places than ducks and geese. Not that they aren't great, but around the perimeter habitats and trees and possibly swallows or swifts grazing the surface of the water to catch a drink. So even though it seems like, the same old birds are around there, this is fine for a patch. Also, an empty, weedy lot at the end of the block or by your work, if it has like seeds or any kind of habitat, which I'm going to be getting into a little bit more about what these actually mean, that works as well. Also, it doesn't have to be close to your home. For example, I know when I used to go to a gym, I work out at home, I do resistance bands, but when I used to join a gym, I made sure that the gym was on my walk home from work. Otherwise, I would never go. So your patch doesn't have to be close to home, but it's got to be close either to your house or to somewhere in your path, of where you're going often. So say you're working somewhere, there's an office park or a business park or a store you work at. There is habitat there. There are trees, there are parking lots, there are light posts, all sorts of things. So that is also another option for a patch. Now, my very first patch, I didn't even know what a patch was. I wasn't even really birding at this point. This was in around 2010, maybe 2009. I lived at this place, a condo complex on Pensacola Beach, Villas on the Gulf. And you see to the left, there's that pond right there. And this is an overhead view of that pond. It doesn't look like much, right? But I saw so many things. There were nesting green herons. There were great blue herons. There were merganser ducks, black skimmers skimming the water. Even songbirds like gray kingbird was singing on a rooftop there. So, and I even, here's a video of my first patch. So when I was there in April, I went back to visit because I gave a talk at the Audubon Society where I started my whole birding journey. It was so special to go down there. But I went back, I'm like, I'm going to visit my first patch and see what's going on over there. So here's a video I took of that. So as you can see, that great blue heron is the star of the show, just like he was when I lived there back in 2010. And I know much more about birds and birding now. So to go back in April, in April, and to see ruby-throated hummingbirds there, which I had never seen when I lived there before. I probably was not looking closely enough. But it was in April, which means the ruby-throated hummingbirds had just arrived from their migration journey heading north, because this was spring. So they had, and Pensacola Beach is a barrier island. So they literally had just, landed and were really trying to fuel up. They were tired and needed energy. And that's what's really cool about the Gulf Coast and barrier islands like that, because the migrating birds have to land there first, and you get really good looks at them. So that was really interesting. And then a lot of ducks and things like that. But I learned a lot about bird behavior and what the common birds were. Like I know the mallard, I know there was a black skimmer that would always come by, and it was really neat to just be able to see these birds pretty much every day. Now this bird is my favorite bird. If you've seen my presentations before, you probably know this. I love sparrows. White-throated sparrows I love because they get me through the winters here in the Northeast. Same for you, probably. You hear them do this. But what's interesting is I first saw this bird in my Florida patch on Pensacola Beach, but it was not common there. I remember seeing this sparrow with yellow, and I thought it was super rare. And it was in an oleander, and that's when I saw my first white-throated sparrow. Little did I know, when I moved a couple years later back to Brooklyn in 2012, that white-throated sparrows would be everywhere. They're everywhere in the winter. Pretty much only 2 months of the year, the dead of summer, is when they're not here, and they're breeding in the boreal forests of Canada. But so it was kind of a foreshadowing of what was awaiting me when I returned to Brooklyn. And this is my patch, Brooklyn Bridge Park. And one of the stars of the patch from this is in Lower Manhattan. There's a nest here during the spring that has peregrine falcons. So that's really exciting. But there are also warblers and vireos and wrens and all sorts of things. So many that I have seen 188 species. Now, a week ago, that was 187. So what happened? Well, believe it or not, I was out in my patch at night after dinner. I didn't have binoculars. I wasn't really birding, but I just looked out. This is the view of Lower Manhattan across the water. And I saw a bird skimming the surface of the water. And I was familiar with the behavior of this bird, even though it was dark. I didn't have binoculars. And what I saw, not this close up, but I saw this in the distance. And I immediately knew that that was a black skimmer. So that was number 188. I couldn't believe it. So, and this is the kind of the point, is when you have a patch, don't feel that you have to actively be birding it all the time. Just being in it and taking a walk, even without binoculars, or just noticing nature, you're going to see things. You're going to hear the bird, maybe the cardinal or the blue jay that you hear all the time. And you just note that you're hearing that. And it becomes like an experience. And you're kind of always in tune to the nature that is happening in your patch. So you'll be able to pick up on rare sightings like this as well. Now, what makes a great patch? Like I said, it can be very simple. It could be out your window. It could be one tree. But really, if you have a choice of more habitats, more restaurants that the birds like, places they look for food, then that's the best. So one of my favorite habitats is leaf litter, because it's easy to look at. There's white-throated sparrows there, ovenbirds, all sorts of things. But obviously, trees and shrubs, preferably ones that fruit or that have a lot of insects. Like oaks are great for caterpillars, especially during migration. The birds love those. Any kind of wetland, which is, a marsh, or it could be a swamp or a bog, is not only great for water birds like ducks and loons and things like that, but also rails that kind of are in the marsh and kind of peek out. Herons as well love that. As I mentioned before, a pond, reservoir, lake is a great place. Stands of prairie grasses, like the long, like switchgrass, these can grow pretty high. And it kind of looks messy. A lot of these habitats look messy. Like I'm talking about the weedy lot, in your neighborhood, or something that doesn't look pretty necessarily, like by normal standards or non-birder standards, could be really good for birds. Prairie grasses are great. Lawns, a lot of kind of get a bad rap for bird habitat, but a lot of birds land on just grassy, regular cut lawns and forage, when they're passing over. Some birds, like palm warblers, forage on lawns, especially if the lawns are really buggy or they have a lot of earthworms. It's always great. And then flowers, not only for nectar, for hummingbirds and orioles, but also for pollen, and a lot of flowers have a lot of insects and bees buzzing around them. So birds love that. So these are some examples of these, birds' favorite restaurants that would make a great addition to a patch. So you can think about, like, if you have a choice of a couple of parks near you or a certain street in your neighborhood, you might want to pick a patch, that has a variety of what we're going to be looking at here. So this is an example: trees with berries attract cedar waxwings. Everybody loves cedar waxwings. So these are hawthorn berries. These are, at least here, they've just started fruiting and they're not ripe yet. So that'll be happening soon in fall. A lot of times when you're walking by fruiting trees and shrubs with berries, it may look like there's nothing going on. So it's worth just taking a look, looking for movement. And before you know it, you might see some birds foraging in there. That happens to me all the time. Stand there, I'll see nothing. And then I'll see one cedar waxwing, two, then catbirds and robins. So trees with berries are great. Trees with insects are great too, especially this time of year and in spring. And even during breeding season, because, these birds, a lot of the warblers, the majority of them only eat insects. They survive on insects. They need it. That's why most of them migrate south for the winter. So oaks with caterpillars and a lot of insects on the underside of leaves, like scale and stuff like this. Here's a ruby crowned kinglet just dangling from a catalpa tree, looking for snacks. Very good habitat. Now, I mentioned I love the leaf litter habitat. And I didn't take this picture today, but I saw this exact same thing today by a little pizza place at my patch. An ovenbird was strutting around on the ground. Now, they generally are found on the ground, except when they're nesting. They may be kind of hunting for things, or when they flee, they may be in a tree. But most of the time, you're going to find these birds on the ground. They actually do nest on the ground in oven-like structures, which is why they're called ovenbirds. And but generally, oh, here comes the siren. It's quick. So generally, they like leaf litter. And why do they like leaf litter? Because there are a lot of arthropods, insects underneath the leaves. So they're just busy walking through the leaf litter looking for insects. I think there it goes. Found something right there. There should be, I think he gets another, here's another one. Yeah. So I love leaf litter. A lot of other birds hang out in leaf litter, like grackles do, robins, catbirds turn over the leaves. And I think one bird that everybody loves is the American woodcock. And this is a tough bird to see because it's so, can you even see it? It took me a minute to see it. This is a shore bird that does not hang out on the shore. It really hangs out in woodland habitats in leaf litter. And, winter's a great time to see these birds. But it's kind of a game to try to detect this bird amongst the leaf litter, but you want to scan it systematically for any interesting shapes. Or if you're lucky, the woodcock may dance. So we had a woodcock in Brooklyn Bridge Park that stayed for 3 months. And it was right by a metal footbridge about 5 feet away. And yes, it danced for us regularly. And I didn't realize this till later, but I captured video of it bending its bill because these birds probe into the dirt, into the earth for earthworms. And they're able to move their bill to grab the earthworm and feel around for it under the earth. So I actually got video of that, believe it or not. Here it is. So now I will say, relating to patch birding, I don't think I ever would have obtained that video without patch birding, because you hear about a woodcock, there's a woodcock here, someone sees it, you go see it. But since I had a patch and the woodcock was there every day, I knew where to find it. I would go look every day at it, and then I would video it and just see what happened. And that's how I observed that behavior. It was super lucky. This is what I'm talking about, is jumping into the nature documentary that is happening near you. The more time you spend with these birds, the more you get used to their behaviors. You can detect what they're going to do, and you're going to see the drama, because it becomes not just finding the bird or not just identifying the bird, but seeing what they're going to do next. And that's one of my favorite things about birds, is their interesting behaviors. A patch is the best place to observe those kind of behaviors on a day-to-day basis. So another great habitat is flower seed heads. American goldfinch love this. So flowers are great. Speaking of seeds, this is a switchgrass I was talking about that looks a little messy, but this can attract a lot of birds, sparrows and buntings. And one year in my patch, it attracted a painted bunting, which is, this is the bird, like the tie-dye bird that is red, green, yellow, and blue in the adults. This is a juvenile male, but the adult males have many colors. So even though this was just a juvenile male, like it attracted a lot of birders. People were coming. It was hiding in the switchgrass, but and it even made the news. My worst picture of the painted bunting they chose to put on the news, but hey, it was a rock star, and it was, thanks to patch birding and taking a different route that I normally didn't, like an elevated path along the Brooklyn Queens Expressway. I thought I'd give it a try, and I found it. Flowers, pink turtlehead is one of my favorite flowers. It looks like, a turtle head, and it's just so fascinating to me. But I never knew that birds would eat from it. But this yellow warbler, I guess, was eating nectar or pollen, or maybe it found some type of an insect. So flower beds, flower fields, not only for the seed heads that the goldfinch and other finches and siskins like, but also for the pollen. I've also seen catbirds eating pollen from hibiscus in the same flower field. Now, what if you don't have a lot of greenery, vegetation, trees in your neighborhood, but you want a patch that's close? That's okay. Like I said, there are varieties of places, and it's just going to change what type of birds you might see. So another option are rooftops and ledges, light posts, awnings, and cables. Now, this is going to give you more of a raptor-centric patch. You're going to get a lot of falcons, hawks, flycatchers too, some songbirds. But like, for example, this red-tailed hawk is in Brooklyn Heights over here. This perches on rooftop ledges a lot. I'm always looking up to see if for silhouettes on the rooftops. And it was coming in for a landing like Superman. Now, American kestrel, this is the smallest falcon in North America, and it loves to perch on poles, posts, cables. This happens to be a volleyball court. So sports courts are another option. I'm telling you, I've seen red-tailed hawks perched at tracks. I've seen birds nesting under the awnings of covered sports courts. So just because I'm not mentioning some of the potential patches, the sky is the limit, really. Just pick an area, look at it, and see what you can find. Now, a lot of times we hear about that ingenious plants are the best for birds, and that is true, but don't discount weeds. I mentioned a weedy patch because this is a prickly lettuce or milk thistle, and I found some warblers in it. Now, I would say if a weedy patch is your only option, migration is going to be the best time. I mean, definitely look all year, but during migration, you have a good chance of getting warblers passing through as they head north or south. Now, one of the major things, if you have a freshwater source in a patch, that's a great option. But even if you don't, when it rains, as long as there are places where water will collect, for example, depressions in the ground or rocks that have little depressions, that's sufficient. Even a lawn that has sprinklers going off or something. I once saw about a dozen cedar waxwings bathing in the water in clumps of grass on a lawn. I mean, I would never have imagined that would happen, but also drips from taps or sprinkler or hose taps. Birds can be around there getting water, but they do. Most birds need fresh water to drink and to bathe. So it's really cool is after a rain, you can go out and when puddles form, like watch from a distance, and you can often see birds going in there and taking a bath. So I love this one. It's like a water slide. This was a slight depression in a log, and my favorite bird, the white-throated sparrow, was taking a bath in there. And cedar waxwing is a bird that is really tough to see bathing out in a local park. But this is a playground. It's a water playground, and when it shuts down that evening and the next morning, there's still water collecting. So I found a cedar waxwing taking a bath over there. So definitely freshwater sources are going to be important. If you have a pond with a shoreline, like with dirt or mud on the shoreline, that's really good. Because if you have a sharp drop off, birds can't forage on the shoreline. It's still okay because you'll have ducks and other things, but if you have something that has a little bit of an edge that kind of gradually goes into the water, that can attract things like northern water thrush warblers and like herons and things like that. So we've looked at what makes a good patch, what our options are, what we should be looking for. But how does having a patch make you a better birder and build your skills? Well, before you start, and a lot of you may already have these tools, but I just want to mention that it's great to have a field guide. I like a paper field guide. My first field guide was the National Geographic Field Guide to the Birds of North America, and Peterson's great too. Stokes. There are many options, but if you're going to get one of these, I'd say keep it out on your coffee table or on your nightstand and just kind of thumb through it often to just get used to the birds. You can also get more specific ones like birds of the Northeast or even birds of a city in some areas is available. So that's really good. And there are also online, there are options and apps as well. So you don't need binoculars, but I would highly recommend binoculars because when you're out there spending quality time with birds, you're going to see some interesting things going on. And the more you're going to see these birds more and more and be able to predict when they edge out from a path and things like this. You're going to want to experience what it looks like through the binoculars because that's like stepping into that nature documentary. You're going to get so close. You're going to see the feather detail. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So it really does enhance the experience. It's not required, but it also is helpful if birds are far away. Obviously, to get a better look and also to help identify them. The important thing about binoculars is not the price or the brand, it's the specs. You want either 8 by 42, 10 by 42, or 7 by 35 millimeter. The first number is the magnification. The reason 8 may be better than 10 is because 10 is more subject to handshake, but I started with 10s. These are all great. And then the second number is how much light gets into the lens from the opposite end. So you want sufficient light. You want to have a good experience with binoculars. So yeah. Also, these are some great apps. I'm sure many of you already have the Merlin Bird ID. If you do not, you're going to want to download it. It's a free app from Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where I work during the day, and it will help you identify birds. It has a sound ID feature that gives you suggestions for what bird might be singing. This is going to be really helpful to use in your patch. So you can let Merlin listen, and then you can it will show you a picture of the birds it thinks are singing. And then you can look, what you're looking for, what the bird looks like. So that's a great aid in helping you find the birds. Once you find it and you've confirmed that was the bird singing, watch it sing. Listen to it sing. Just spend some time with it. This is the best way to get better at identifying bird sounds. If you don't get a chance to see the bird, it's hidden or out of view, you can watch videos online. You can go to MacaulayLibrary.org, which is a Cornell Lab of Ornithology project, or you can look on YouTube. Now, eBird is a project I work on a lot with the lab, and that is for recording your bird sightings. So if you're sure in your identifications, the birds you're able to identify, even if it's just one or two, if you know I'm seeing a northern mockingbird, I'm seeing a common yellowthroat. You can create bird lists in eBird, and it will store your life list. You'll also be contributing to citizen science and participatory science, and it can help inform conservation actions and identify really important bird areas. And I'm going to show you a little bit about how we put that science to work in a bit. So once you're out in your patch and you have your tools, like the field guide you can bring with you, Peterson's a great field guide to bring with you. Or I forgot to mention the Merlin Bird ID app also has a built-in field guide under the Explore feature. But when you're out there, the important thing is to just start observing. Like notice even the most common birds. If you already know house sparrows or a pigeon, just watch it. Watch what it does. Because a lot of times these birds will interact with other birds that you may not know or that look different. And getting familiar with the common birds of your patch is the first step so that you can distinguish when something looks different. Okay. So just kind of experience what's going on out there and use Merlin and maybe enter an eBird list as well. So when you're out there, you'll want to look at birds in flight. Now, one of the things that happens when you're out looking at a bird, it'll take off and you go, oh, it flew away. But the thing is, it's a great skill that you can build in your patch is to lock onto the bird and follow it in flight. Now, because the more you do this, it'll actually seem like they're getting slower and slower. So it's kind of the same when you're learning to juggle. Like everything seems like just all balls in the air at once, but once you learn, it seems very slow and controlled. Same thing with bird flight. So I never thought I would be able to identify a bird in flight. But what you can do is practice on the common birds, say pigeons, or how pigeons fly slowly, so they're not the most useful for it, but say house sparrows or some of the common songbirds in your area, when they take off, follow them, see where they land. Because we're in migration now. When you see a migrating bird or something you can't identify, something that's yellow or red, and it takes off, you want to lock onto that, see where it lands. And if it lands somewhere in the area, you can walk over there and potentially get a better view. Approach it slowly. Use your binoculars if you have them. And then once you get a good view and you've got some good field marks like colors and patterns of plumage to use to identify it, then you can move closer and try to get a better look and jump into that nature documentary. But the point of this is that you are practicing tracking birds in flight. This is also going to help you detect flight styles. Different birds have different flight styles. Woodpeckers have an undulating flight pattern where they dip down as they fly. So kind of notice that as well when you are following these birds. Kind of try to describe either in notes, you can keep a notebook, or in your head, what kind of style does that bird have in its flight? I remember when I started birding and I read descriptions of birds about their behaviors. And I remember it said Eastern phoebe, but obviously it actually pumps its tail up and down. And I thought, I can't even find the bird. I'll never be able to see it pumping its tail up and down. I mean, I kind of ignored it at first. But it's true. It's true. And you know how you'll be able to detect this? By having a patch. When you have a patch, you're going to see these birds come through. A lot of you probably have phoebes maybe nesting on your property, and you've had some quality time with phoebes. But you get more familiar with these birds, and this is going to help you identify them and also notice when something's different. And even with an Eastern phoebe, once you learn this bird and you see it pumping its tail up and down, you know it usually perches low and how it jumps out either onto a lawn or over a pond to catch insects. You will be able to identify it from silhouette and behavior alone, kind of like I did with the black skimmer. So these are I know it may seem impossible to imagine that right now, but this is what patch birding is going to do for you, okay? Other cool behaviors, I never saw this until I had a patch, was how Baltimore orioles, a lot of oriole species pierce the base of flowers and they drink the nectar. I've seen them fighting with hummingbirds before. Had no idea they did this. But a lot of times you can see fallen flowers on the ground. And if you do, check them for slits, because if there's a slit in it, it means potentially a bird was eating the nectar from it. Other behaviors you'll notice are birds kind of gathering together that weren't, like during the summer, and then all of a sudden they gather. I call this the South America trip planning meeting, because this is when the barn swallows gather in summer, like midsummer, when their breeding season is done and they're getting ready to all fly and flock to South America. And it always makes me sad because I won't be able to see them until next year, but it's really neat to kind of predict, what they're going to do next, what they're up to. So the predictability, like I said, it gets really fun. And if you can imagine, if you go on a birding trip to some location you've never been before, some country you've never been to, I do this all the time, but you go and it's such a different habitat and such a different area, different species. You can't really predict what's going to go on. This is why it's great to hire a bird guide who has that knowledge. But what's fun about having a patch, even if it's with crows or, birds that you see a lot of, you can kind of know what's going to happen. So every time I hear crows cawing, I know there's a good chance of some drama going on. And I would highly suggest anytime you hear crows cawing, look around, try to find the crows, see if they're chasing a raptor. This is a rare sight to see the raptor chasing the crows. Usually it's the other way around. But yeah, I love this. I love the predictability you get in a patch. But this was unpredictable. I never thought I'd see, a pigeon and a house sparrow fighting over a waffle cone. And it kind of looks like they're in a boxing ring and there are two other house sparrows in the corners. Pretty neat. The other thing that a patch is going to give you is you're going to learn about food and habitat association. So I mentioned all of the great habitats, bird restaurants that are good for a patch, but you're going to be able to notice, hey, the ovenbird is always in the leaf litter. So you'll know during migration, if I want to find an ovenbird, I'm going to look in the leaf litter. Or if I see something kind of strutting like a chicken from a distance, which is what this bird does, in leaf litter during migration, it's probably an ovenbird. So you're getting a jump up on the ID. You can go find it, but you really get used to these things. I love this plant. This is a sweet bay magnolia. Not a lot of birds eat these fruits, but this is a red-eyed vireo. That is one bird that loves these fruits in fall. Also the eastern kingbird. So you kind of deepen your connection with nature here, because once you get into this in a patch, you're going to wonder, what is that bird eating? Why is it on that tree? What insects is it eating? What fruits? And then you'll be curious naturally and probably look up the tree, and you'll just start to learn about trees and insects and all these things without even trying, really. So it really deepens your connection with nature and lets you jump further into that nature documentary. So how can it help with your identification? So what you've probably gathered as I've been talking about this is your patch is your lab. It's your classroom. It's such a fun classroom where you are getting to observe and study bird behaviors and take a look at birds. Now, you're going to become very knowledgeable about the birds that are in your patch. So say you have Merlin going and you see this bird up here and it's vocalizing. It's doing something like a laughter. I'm going to let you listen to this. Now, the Merlin will tell you probably that is an American kestrel, and it's gorgeous. It's pretty easy to identify this bird just by looking at it because of the patterning and the beautiful colors. But what I would recommend is when you see this, if the bird is vocalizing, really, like I said, listen to it, watch it vocalize. And if you can't see it, but you know it's the kestrel singing, say kestrel, kestrel, kestrel in your head. Because a lot of people, I've had people come to my patch, and when I hear the kestrel, they're like, that's a kestrel? I've never heard that before. I only know that because it does this sound in my patch. It's perched on posts, maybe where someone else is, there are trees, and it doesn't really have a habitat for the kestrels to hang out long enough to be doing this kind of thing. So really tune in to single species. Don't be too overwhelmed at first with if there are a lot of birds. Try to hook into one. Note its field marks, its plumage, look it up in your field guide or your Merlin app, and really get to know the bird. And next time you go out, if you see it again, try to identify it without the help of Merlin, without the help of the field guide, and then you'll start to internalize it. Okay, so that's how that works. Same thing with sound. You'll be able to notice different vocalizations. These are crows. One's an American crow and a fish crow. They sound different, and it's good to practice in your patch listening for these different types of crows. Here's the American. And here's the fish. Now, I mentioned how I saw the black skimmer in my patch, right? And thinking back to my very first patch in Pensacola, Florida in 2010, there were skimmers there all the time at dusk. They would come by, I would see them, and I really got used to them. They were not uncommon. They were there all the time. But because I saw them all the time, I got the behavior and the form, the silhouette ingrained into my mind to prepare me to be out birding without binoculars in Brooklyn and identify them by a silhouette in Brooklyn Bridge Park. So, but I credit it towards spending so much time with them in that tiny little pond I showed you in my condo complex in Pensacola. There's that silhouette. Now, another great thing about a patch is that you can hang out with the breeding birds. And a lot of people say summer's not a great time for birds. It's just migration. That's great. But in summer is when the birds are breeding. So any birds that are, some may be resident all year round in your area and they're building nests. But some may be coming up from the south and building nests. For example, gray catbird is one of those, warbling vireo, some of the warblers like yellow warbler. These are the barn swallows. So barn swallows are one of my favorites. And you will get quality time with the birds because they have to stay there. They're building a nest. So you'll get to see the nest building. Well, first you'll get to see the courtship. You'll get to see the nest building, the raising of the young, the fledging, all of these things. So it's just really exciting, more barn swallows to witness it. So that's one of my favorite things about a patch is that you have a great, summer to look forward to with patch. So there are other positive impacts of having a patch. And it's hard to know until you start doing this, but it is life-changing. Birding is life-changing, but having a patch even more so. It has so many great benefits. It raises awareness like in your community because someone may see you out there, like in my local park, people see me and they ask me what I'm doing. I get to tell them about the birds. They ask me questions about birds. I remember I was taking a picture of this scarlet tanager that was feeding from an apple on the lawn in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And I was sitting on the lawn taking photos and a lot of people came over and asked me about this bird. But the cool thing was they got to see it too. Like just by walking by and seeing me watching the bird, they started looking too. So you're just going to turn other people on to birds as well. This was the gardening staff from back in around 2012. And we had a great dialogue going. I tell them what I was seeing and how great their work was in attracting birds. And then they'd tell me what birds they were seeing. So you're developing a great sense of community too if you're birding a local park or reservoir that has a staff. Also, something you'll notice is that you'll start caring a little bit more than you used to about your patch. I never expected this to happen. I'm not much of an activist or vocal about issues really like with conservation. I didn't think I was. But then when I had Brooklyn Bridge Park, I noticed, see where this yellow line is? They had built this condo tower and a lot of birds were hitting the windows because of the reflections of the trees in the windows because birds can't detect reflections. And, a bird here and there, it's sad, but there were a lot of birds. So I decided I needed to do something because I cared about the birds of my patch. And even if I could even just save one bird, that was important to me. So I came up with a proposal of solutions and I got a meeting with the designer. And if you look above those wooden slats on the right and you look above that, just on the windows, you can see some vertical stripes on the windows. They actually treated the glass in the first two floors, which is the toughest for birds because that's where the reflections were happening. And I went and I took a picture of myself in the window treated glass. And I offered to raise money and they didn't even, they said, no, we'll do it. And the great thing about this was that those windows were not they weren't affecting views of people living there because they were on the lower floors. There were some restrooms there. And so I had it easy. A lot of times it's aesthetics and there are other options. There are dots and things like that are not as intrusive, but basically, yeah. So I think I at least saved a bird, maybe more. I'm seeing fewer and fewer window strikes there. I checked today, I didn't see any. Same thing. I mean, just you're starting a dialogue with people in the neighborhood that see you looking at birds in your local park or at the reservoir. And if it does have a staff, you can influence some of their habitat decisions. For example, I had talked to the head horticulturist in Brooklyn Bridge Park years ago and said that, oh, because you've planted the bayberry here, we have yellow rump warblers overwintering in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And I mentioned, that doesn't happen in other parks in the city that don't have bayberry. And she got so excited. She said, really, really? So the next phase of the park, they bought so much bayberry. And then the next year we had like 24 yellow rump warblers overwintering on bayberry. So people get excited about birds using the habitat, the gardeners, park staff, ground staff. And so definitely let them know about how their work is attracting birds, because it really develops a great dialogue with you and them. So here's another example: chipping sparrow in the little blue stem grasses. I always let the park gardeners know of cool sparrows that are visiting. This is a prairie grass, just beautiful colors. And also when you're patch birding, you can fill in data gaps. So for participatory science, in eBird, when you're submitting your lists, your patch may not be really documented. People may not be submitting lists for that location, which means you can fill in the birds you're seeing there. And that is really important data, because it can help in conservation and identifying important places for birds. Here's an example of a yellow warbler, that little bird you're seeing on the corner of a lot of my slides. And this is based on eBird data that people just like you and me have submitted to the eBird platform. And the data scientists have used that data to model the migration path of this bird. So let's check it out. Pretty impressive. So, I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. People can use that information to, better wintering habitats for birds, or stopover sites during migration, or use the data to. My favorite example was the Florida drone ban. There were some birds at a marsh, and someone was flying a drone, and the birds got really quiet for several days. So someone went to the park ranger, said, we have this eBird data. This is an important bird habitat. A lot of rails are here, and the birds are not vocalizing since the drone came by. And eventually it led to the drone ban in Florida state parks. So just by, someone submitting their list for a patch, so it has a huge impact. Also, you may find when you're doing this at a local park, or somewhere, even maybe at your office parking lot or something on the perimeter, people may ask for your data. I had this happen to me. People want to know how the birds are using the trees and the habitats that they have planted, and if it's working, because a lot of times they try to attract birds and pollinators, and they don't know how well it's working, because they're not the ones, they're not the patch experts like you are. So as you can see, this really just has so many aspects. It deepens your connection with nature. This is tiny, candy striped leafhopper. It's super tiny, but you'll start to notice things like this: the spice bush swallowtail in leaves, hummingbird clearwing moth. This really surprised me. I was taking photos and I saw this one of a laughing gull and a line seahorse. I didn't even know there were seahorses in the East River in New York City. Also, harbor seal was in my patch. But really, when it comes down to it, like I mentioned, even just the common birds, I love seeing them doing wild things. Like a pigeon, I just watched it stretching. I was taking photos and it went into a turkey pose. Or when it snowed and all the trash was covered up, a crow started going clamming. And I'll end with this one. This is a territorial, like staking out territory for downy woodpeckers. I've only seen this once, and I only saw it in my patch. But having a patch increases your likelihood of seeing these things and seeing these behaviors. So really, patch birding has it all, and I would highly encourage you to give it a try. And a lot of these tips are in my book, Find More Birds, and you can get more tips and learn how to find more birds, and really how to have success in a patch. So as Mina mentioned, that's available from Aesop's Fable, and I will be signing book plates for those as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Mina.
Wow. As always, amazing. So much great information that I just I envision you like out in a patch, just kind of like all there all day. You've got your coffee and your, your binoculars and your
That's
camera. And
it.
you
Yeah,
take
on the
these
weekends for
beautiful,
sure. Yes.
yeah, beautiful pictures. The pictures are fantastic. So I'm
Thank
just
you.
going to start going into questions. I just want to remind you all, if you have questions, to put them in the Q&A. Sometimes they go by too fast in the chat for me to keep a track of. So a couple people, Michelle and Varun, wanted to ask, what's your favorite time of day for birding?
That's a great question. Now, I am not a morning person, and I know historically, there's this idea that you have to get up super early to go birding. Especially during migration, that's not true. You can find birds eating all day long. It also depends on the sun. Like if there's a building blocking the sun, I would wait till the sun is over the building. But generally, yeah, the dawn is a great time. The birds are singing, especially in spring. And then about an hour before sunset, because in both cases, the birds are foraging actively because either they haven't eaten all night or they need to eat before they're about to roost for the night and not forage anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not a morning person either, so I would probably miss a lot of that. Teresa asks if there was a cost to either of those apps that you mentioned, eBird and Merlin.
They are both free.
Both free. Awesome. Varun asks another question. As someone who wants to get started with birding, I find it difficult to identify the birds and spotting them simultaneously. Do you suggest moving around and following birds in flight, or just being stationary and observe first? Any beginner tips around this?
Oh, that's a great question. So like, should you chase a bird? Yeah. It depends. I mean, one of my big tips is to stay a while, like stay and observe. If there are several birds or a lot of birds in one area and one flies, I would say stay where you are unless that bird that flew really piqued your interest for some reason, like it was some bright colors or it had a crazy behavior that you wanted to get more into. So kind of just it's up to you, see how you feel. But I would say, like you mentioned, staying in one spot is a really good way to get used to birds and identify them. If you can, try to keep some distance first, like notice the bird and then get get a look at them, see what they're doing, note their field marks, and then move in a little closer. Keep trying, but what you don't want to do is go so close right away that they fly away. So take your time as you're doing this, and you'll really get some good looks. Another one of my favorite tips is sitting down. I did that today with an oven bird. I sat on the ground, and it actually started walking towards me. So yeah.
Well, that was the question I had is when you're in a patch for a long time, let's say a few hours, did the birds actually feel more comfortable with you to kind of like sit on your shoulder or something?
I don't think so, but I mean, I did have a golden crown kinglet hop on my knee, but it was because if you notice something going on, like there are birds on a lawn or on an edge in a meadow, and there's a place to sit, take a seat because then they will become more comfortable if you are lower, but not just your presence alone. I don't think makes them more comfortable, but if you're low, they're less threatened. They'll start to edge out and forage like right in front of you. It's really amazing.
Wow, that is no what is it called? Self-preservation whatsoever there. Um, okay. Somebody asked, where was that photo of the gull and seahorse? Because that was super cool. I think you said East River.
Yeah, so it was right in Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is along the East River, about a mile down from the Brooklyn Bridge. Yeah, so laughing gulls are here in the summer, and they're just about leaving now. Well, they'll in the early fall too, but they'll be heading south for winter. Yeah, so yeah, it was pretty amazing to see that.
And Nancy asked, should you not have a bird feeder out in the summer?
No, you can have a bird feeder out in the summer because hummingbirds could come by, and seeds and things. Just make sure to keep your feeders clean, and you don't want them close to windows with reflections because you don't want birds crashing into the windows. Also, if there is a hawk in your neighborhood, try to maybe put the feeder out of reach of the hawk, like behind a tree or with some kind of a barrier. So just make sure the birds are safe. And yeah, I think it's fine in the summer.
Hmm. We have bird feeders out all year long, and my husband, I thought it was awesome the way you said that the first thing you said was that your window is sort of your first patch because you just look out the window and you see the birds, and we do the same here.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, it's great. Oh, I have a quick question, and I know we have some from the audience, and we might stay another 5 or 10 minutes after 8. What about those bird feeders that have the camera in them? Are they, I mean, it's sort of like the lazy man's birder type of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know much about them, but it sounds like a really cool idea. And I think they have a built-in ID as well. I
Yes.
think some of
Yeah.
them do. Yeah. I mean, I think that would be a great way if you want to make the investment and learn birds. It seems like that would be awesome. Plus, they're visiting your yard and you can tell which seeds they're eating, what's working when you're putting, feeders out. I think that's
Hmm.
great.
Yeah, I'm interested on one of those. Both Shepard and Janine would like to know what kind of photo equipment you use because your pictures are just so sensational. But Janine especially wants to know about lenses.
Thank you so much. A lot of people are using mirrorless cameras these days, and I have not made the switch, believe it or not. I still use a Canon EOS 7D and a 100 to 400 millimeter lens, which I guess about, I don't know, 3, 4 years ago was kind of the norm. But then the mirrorless cameras came out, and pretty much every printer I know switched to those. But I mean, so I think the setup that I use, I think that you can't get it new. You have to get it used and refurbished, which is fine. I mean, my first camera setup, which was similar, I got refurbished. And I will say I've asked people about their experience with mirrorless cameras, and some of them do say, it can be a little tough to get smaller birds, lock on to smaller birds and get them in focus. So my view is how much better can my photos get? I mean, not to sound egotistical, but you're right. My photos are great. I really want so much feather detail that you can see a mite on the feathers? I don't know. I mean, I think that my photos are good enough, and I don't feel the need right now, as long as my camera works, to get a new one. So you can also do digital zoom cameras work really well, and they're more affordable than with the built-in lenses. So, but yeah, if you want to email me at hwbirds@gmail.com if you have more camera questions, let me know.
Hmm. And I'm gonna suggest that you follow Heather on social media because her TikToks and her Instagram posts are phenomenal. Um, Catherine asks, says the Carolina Wren has been her favorite this summer. Do you think they'll be gone this winter?
Oh, I love the Carolina Red. They're resident in a lot of areas in the Northeast, so they probably won't be as active, probably not singing as much. Although I'm hearing them sing right now. I do see them a lot picking through old nests, like squirrels' nests and things like that, in the winter, because food gets scarce for them in the winter. So they are investigating areas they normally wouldn't. So I think you'll still see them. It just won't be as much of a nature documentary like you're seeing in the spring and summer.
Hmm. Oh, it makes sense. Cecile asks, what bird do you see most in your patch?
Probably mockingbirds. Yeah, northern mockingbirds. They own the place. Yeah, they're year round. Also mourning doves for another one.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Jan asks, any suggestions for getting in better touch with owls? I saw one flying across my yard a couple of weeks ago first, and I've lived here for almost 40 years.
Oh, well, that's amazing. That is so lucky you saw one fly across. I have never seen an owl in my patch, believe it or not. So I think that they have visited, like small saw-whet owls I would anticipate would visit. I've looked, but owls are difficult. There is a section in Find More Birds about how to find owls. The first step is getting used to their calls. So go to either eBird or in the Merlin app and listen to the calls of the great horned owl and the barred owl, because those are the most common ones you will hear. So that way you'll be able to detect when they're in your neighborhood, and then you can maybe, like, at dusk is a good time to watch for them taking off, which is may have been when you saw that bird flying by taking off to hunt. But I've had some luck with owls, like when I'm looking for another species, like in the woods. I happen upon two barred owls. So you want to look for silhouettes and shapes, because during the day, a lot of times they'll just be roosting. Snowy owls are different. They hunt during the day, but barred owls, great horned owls, they'll just be there. So train your eyes to look for those kind of owl silhouettes. But I mentioned mockingbirds. Mockingbirds often spar with owls even during the day. So similar to the crow drama I mentioned, if you hear a mockingbird kind of being aggressive or vocalizing a lot or jumping on something, watch it, because I saw one jumping on a great horned owl in Florida once.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Charlotte says in the chat that owls will use nest boxes properly built for them. So that might be an option to do that.
Yes. Excellent.
Somebody says, I walk every morning between 5:30 and 6. I hear them chirping as the dawn brightens, but I don't see them. How can I identify them by hearing them only?
I'm so excited because I think you can use the Merlin app tomorrow at 5:30. So I really want to know what you see actually, but or what you hear. So Merlin can listen for you and it will give you suggestions. And yeah, I'm not sure what birds you're hearing. They could be starlings or finches or sparrows, but yeah, I would start with the Merlin app and then if you just want to identify them by sound, that would be the way. And then also, I would double check that the birds that Merlin says are being commonly seen in your neighborhood. Merlin will let you know suggestions based on your area, but it also helps to go to ebird.org, go to explore, type in your county and your area, and just check if those birds are being seen in your county or in parks near you. And that'll give you a big clue, or parks or neighborhoods people enter from all places, as a double verification just to see that they're there. Have fun tomorrow. I wish I could be there with you.
I wish you could be there with her too. Gail says, we saw bald eagles while we were kayaking along the Charles River for the past couple of years. We didn't see them this year, and I was surprised because I thought they'd come back to the same nest every year and build on. Is that not true?
I'm not sure if they come to the same nest. I don't know. So yeah, but I know that a lot of eagles do. So I wouldn't doubt it. But yeah, I'm not sure. But did you see any bald? I don't know if you saw any bald eagles, but yeah, it could be. I hate to think of it, but maybe they didn't survive or something happened, or I don't know. But
I got a message from somebody in the chat that they just saw a bald eagle in Tewksbury about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, exciting.
I know. Gail said no eagles this year. All right. So Dan says this is a good question. Approximately what is the size of a good patch?
Oh, that is a great question. It can be as small or not too, you don't want it too large. Like it should be something you can cover in a morning, which sounds big, right? Like I would say like about like a block or two, or the size of a small to medium sized park. But it depends on what's around you. Like even like an empty lot with weeds and trees, that's good, or your backyard. But something like, a large park, like I'm thinking Central Park, that really wouldn't be your patch. It's too big. But a part of Central Park would be like, even for me, I have Brooklyn Bridge Park. It's a long park. It's about a mile and a half long and it's thin. So it's doable in a morning, but a lot of times I'll just go to one section. So I have patches within the patch. So it's all kind of based on how much time you have and how often you're going to do it. But great question.
Oh, that's interesting because I think I misunderstood what you meant by patch. I thought it meant it was like a place where you that's the spot you sit when you go birding.
Well, the patch is the habitats, it's a place that you're going to look for birds most days. Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense because I was like, do you just go to the same spot every single day and for so many hours?
Well, you can't. There's also the John Young wrote What the Robin Knows, and he talks about a sit spot. So that's another possibility. You could just sit on a bench and that could be your patch, whatever the landscape is there. So that's a valid patch as well.
Okay. All right. That's good. So we have some flexibility. Just a couple more questions. Varun asks, do you organize and host any bird watching trails and activities? He doesn't say this, but I would totally go on one of those with you.
Like tours, and yes, so I lead tours in Brooklyn Bridge Park and other places in the city, Ridgewood Reservoir in Queens. I generally don't do them outside of New York City, but I mean, I would if I would, was invited somewhere to do something, I would love to do that. But yeah, and but I try to share what I'm doing, with my videos that I post on Instagram and TikTok. So you'll get my experiences pretty much, you'll see what I'm seeing. You'll see my nature documentary and my patch, and hopefully you'll post yours as well. So
Mhm.
Instagram, I have Brooklyn Bridge Birds, which is mainly photos of my patch, but the reels I post on Real Heather Wolf. Those are the videos. Real Heather Wolf, REAL Heather Wolf. And also on TikTok at Heather Birds.
Okay. Um, if we wanted to, if you were doing a tour, a birding tour in Queens or Brooklyn, how would we know about it?
Yeah. So if you go to heatherwolf.com and then click on events at the top, that has all my events.
Okay, because I'm going to do that one after this talk.
You can also get on my newsletter if you're not already on the newsletter. So if you go to, I think you can sign up at heatherwolf.com. If not, go to brooklynridgebirds.com and you'll see the newsletter sign up.
Okay. Shane asks, should nest boxes be cleaned out each year?
I'm not an expert on nest boxes, but I believe so because there will be feces in there from the birds. There will be insects collecting. So I think that makes sense, but I would look it up and double check. But yeah, it sounds like a good plan to me.
Okay. Madeline says Spot Pond in Stoneham, Mass in the Middlesex Fells Reservation is a great patch. She also has a comment about American bald eagles. We're seeing them at Spot Pond intermittently now, likely a male adult and a male immature by size. They usually visit the pond early August, but arrived late this year. The adult male is vocalizing, looking for a mate, you think? Mass
And
Audubon Zoom on eagles asks ABEs stay where they are born. Said they stay where they're born unless it gets too crowded with other eagles, then they look for new territory. Is that
so
all
this is a question about the eagles.
right? Are they looking for a mate when they're vocalizing?
They could be, so the interesting thing about eagles, in some parts of the US, they actually breed in the winter. So, I'm not sure. I don't know what it's like in the Northeast. I know in Florida they breed in the winter. I thought it was spring here, but it's definitely possible. Like when they're vocalizing, they could be doing that, but they have that classic courtship too, where they lock talons in the air and they spiral down. So look for aerial displays between two adult birds as well when you're looking for courtship.
So we call that public display of affection. You call it aerial display of affection.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
awesome. I just have one last question. This is for
Sure.
me. With so many people birding nowadays, is it hard to find a patch where you're not like surrounded by other people?
Oh, that's a good question because when I first started in my patch, there was no one there. Now there are like 20 people that bird it regularly. No, I think you can still find a place. I mean, your backyard would be yours, your block. I mean, um, yeah, no, it's definitely possible to find one. And if you have a big park, you can always try to bird a section of the park where people don't usually go. Because one thing I did mention about a patch, because I don't know, a lot of people like a place that seems like it's not birdie. They want their patch to be a place that a lot of people don't bird for that reason because it's theirs. But
Mhm.
then all of a sudden they start finding all these great birds, and then it becomes popular and all. So, but no, to answer your question, I think you can find a place, and if you don't be shy to just like if you want to be alone and do your own thing, that's fine. I mean, a lot of birders, you know, are like that and will respect that.
Great. It's good to know. I mean, it seems like a really tight and respectful community, not just with the birds and nature, but with the people around them.
Yeah, I mean, and can I just say one more thing to your point is that I will say, um, birding your patch alone, you're going to get better birding alone because you should go on walks as well and learn from people. But to apply all of that and to kind of work things out on your own, just like with anything, you need to do it alone. So definitely have a balance of that and spend some time alone in your patch.
I love it because we do all need to get back to nature a little bit, and not feel like we have to be constantly chasing not excitement, but something.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
I mean, and once you get into the patch, you'll not stop, you'll stop caring so much about getting so many birds. Like at first I was like, oh, I gotta see more birds, but I'll go out there and not see a bird. And maybe I'll see a monarch butterfly or I'll see a squirrel. But it's so peaceful and you feel so much better, even just going to the patch for 5 minutes,
Mhm.
10 minutes. That's gonna help your body, your brain, your mindfulness, everything.
Right. And you have to get off your device, right? Because you can't be watching your phone while you're trying to see birds.
Well, I mean, you use Merlin. I mean, that's the one thing is that, but yeah, try to really experience it. Try to observe the bird. I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, spend some time with the bird. And the point of that was like, rather than jumping right to the field guide or right to the Merlin field guide portion, just look at what the bird's doing. Like really experience it. Have fun with it. Like you're in the nature documentary.
Mhm.
And then try to identify.
Well, that all good advice. I love it. And I really appreciate once again your time and attention to detail around this, something that we actually all just really love, but don't all know enough about to really get out there. So I appreciate this. And the whole idea of a patch just tickles me silly. I can't even tell you.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you so much for having me, Mina. And thank you everyone for being here and for the great questions. And I hope I get to bird with you all someday.
Well, now it's become a lifelong dream. I'm definitely going to check out your website. Thank you all for being here with us tonight, and I hope you have happy birding in your future. Obviously, you have enough information now to get started, and if you're already a birder, you have a place to go look for a patch now. So have a wonderful night, and I will talk to you, Heather, again soon.
Bye, Mina. Bye, everyone. Good night.
Good night, everyone.